Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 252 of Retropower Uncut. And hopefully I got the episode number right. I'm just starting to doubt myself. No, I think we're all right. And we're going to start with the E-Type. It's standing behind me with its mouth open, or its boot open. And that's a good place to start actually, because Scott has done just basically wrapping up, I think I've said this previously, but basically we're wrapping up a lot of the small tail end, sometimes quite mundane and sometimes awkward, and jobs that have been put off, and all of the little things that need doing at the end of a metalwork part of a project so that they don't need doing after the car's painted when we find we've forgotten them. And one of those was in the boot, which is the jack. We are doing a couple of arrangements for things in the back of the car in terms of servicing stuff. Now the car is going to have wire wheels and so we need the means to fit and unfit a wheel, and the customer wants a full-size spare wheel in this car for various reasons, all of which are good reasons. So because of that we need a spinner spanner, which is like a wooden thing that basically goes onto your spinner to tighten it up or untighten it once you've cracked it loose. And then we need a hammer for doing the spinners up and undoing them, which in keeping with the original will be a lead hammer. So we're going to get a lead hammer from Thor, and that will go in a foam insert inside the spare, underneath and inside, trapped inside the spare wheel, which will be clamped into the boot by a bolt in the middle, normal arrangement. So we'll have the lead hammer, we'll have the hardwood spanner, and we'll have the handle for a jack. It's a ratcheting jack, and then we have the jack, which is a scissor type jack, stowed behind the wheel arch on the offside of the car. And to that end, that needs a support into the sheet metal to hold the jack, which Scott's done. A means of strapping it on, which is going to be a leather strap or a rubber strap, don't know if that's decided yet, but he's made the facility to attach the strap, which can be welded to the wheel arch. I think has been welded to the wheel arch. If it's not, then it will be. But the bottom of the jack is supported on what is the external sheet metal of the car. So we don't want to weld to that because we've basically avoided any welding to the underside of that rear section. So we don't put any distortion into it because it's a beautiful, smooth curve. Andy Hall, who did the sheet metal on this, I mentioned him before, Vintage Machines. If you need the absolute best quality when it comes to this type of sheet metal work, Andy Hall's your man. Just speak to him. He has done all this, he's made a beautiful job of it, and what we didn't want to do is ruin all that sheet metal by putting spot welds and plug welds all over it. So we've bonded in, we've used a structural panel bonding adhesive, which is made by a company called Pleo Grip, or it is called Pleo Grip. I don't know if they make it or whether that's a manufacturer or what, but it's a Pleo Grip product anyway, and that is glued onto, basically the jack support cup is glued onto the sheet metal, the inside of the sheet metal part of the car, the outer part. It is glued onto the inside face of that using this Pleo Grip epoxy panel bond structural adhesive. So that is done. That's a long convoluted way of saying it's got a jack in it now. So that's done, and then Scott's also working on various parts at the front of the car, mainly the coolant pipe work. I'll come a little bit further along because Jamie's moved along. Basically we've been working on getting the coolant in and out of the heater matrix. So this is all of George's design work, both sides, and this is the HVAC unit that we've done, which is housed both here and down into the footwell inside the car and goes through a modified bulkhead section. We need the means to get the coolant, the hot coolant, into this and the slightly cooler coolant back out of it. The hot coolant is coming from the elbow on the back of the cylinder head this side, the water elbow, via a hose about that long straight into here. Couldn't get simpler, easiest thing in the world. And then the return goes from the bottom of the heater to the original water return as it was on the E-Type originally, which is a little hose tail off the inlet elbow to the sump mounted oil to water heat exchanger. So that return goes into there and it meets the flow into there from the, hang on, I've got to get this right, wait, yes, the flow going to the water pump, sorry, it's the outlet from that. I've got to get this the right way around. Yeah, the flow is down the radiator, back down the hose to the far side, the inlet on the far side of the oil-to-water heat exchanger, across the oil-to-water heat exchanger, then up this pipe here, through that nice machined fitting that you saw the other week that Andy Concept 303 machined for us, and that goes into the water pump, pumpy, into the engine, through the engine, comes out hot, out of the top hose, through past the header tank, which will be in the middle, and down into the radiator, and round it goes. So that's that. Scott's also finished off the top and bottom, well, they're not top and bottom, they're both the bottom hoses, but both halves of the bottom hose, these 2-inch pipes. We've done these slightly oversized. I think originally they were 1 3/4, or they were partially 2-inch, partially 1 3/4. We've done it all in 2-inch on the grounds that they've got some convoluted bends in, and the bends are going to knock the efficiency of the pipe a little bit. So rather than bring it down to 1 3/4, given that at a squeeze we could get 2-inch in, basically it was difficult either way, so we might as well make it really difficult and keep it 2-inch, which we've done. So all of that is now in 2-inch pipe, and that just keeps the flow efficiency up because we've got a lot of bends in the system. So that's that all fits. He's also trial fitted the fittings in the steering rack, they all fit. He's worked out the pipework run for the transmission oil cooler for the 4L80 auto box that we're using in this car. This car is auto, the customer wants an auto. So we're using a 4L80 with an aftermarket controller, and the coolant pipes from that need to feeding to the radiator. We've got again oil to water heat exchange in the radiator for the trans oil cooler, so Scott's worked out the pipe run for that. He's worked out the pipe run for the engine oil flow. I think that's, and he's mounted the water shut-off valve for the heater arrangement. That's now mounted under the top of the chassis on this side. That is on the return. I think I might have mentioned this before. We've put that on the return flow because we couldn't neatly fit it in the feed flow to the heat exchanger in the cabin heater in the HVAC unit. We've put that on the return. Obviously it means hot water will be getting into, you'll get some conduction through into the heater matrix all the time. However, you would anyway, you'd get conduction through the valve anyway. I don't think, we decided it wouldn't really make a lot of difference as long as the circulation shut off. This system has a flapper in it anyway, which shuts the airflow off from the heater matrix anyway. So it's not like there'll be airflow going through a still warm heater matrix anyway. So we decided that was okay. I think at that point I'm going to shut up about this, other than to, one other thing, Scott's also been finishing off the, he's now been working on and is about to finish off the refrigerant lines in the cabin area for the HVAC unit, and then the only bit left to do will be the lines from the compressor and the condenser, and the condenser we're awaiting from Fenair International. They have sourced us the correct or a suitable condenser that they know, because they fitted them, will work with this radiator, with the V12 E-Type radiator in a neat fashion, and it looks certainly in the pictures like that should be perfect. So we're just waiting for that. Once we've got that, we can then complete the rest of the dry build of the refrigerant lines. And that's another big plumbing job ticked off. So we are getting fairly well forward. The next step really is going to be to get the dash mounted and start work on the direction control valves for the HVAC inside the car, because we're burying some direction control valves inside the bulkhead, like we did on the other E-Type that you've seen, the Series 2 that you'll have seen a long time ago on videos, where James had done a set of direction control valves in the bulkhead area. We're going to do the same on this car, I believe, for the air direction control. So that's to come. But yeah, Scott's making good progress. All nitty-gritty jobs. It's very, very difficult because most of them are difficult access. They're jobs that are being done now for the reason that they've usually been put off because they're flipping awkward. So yes, all awkward, fiddly. Not the most satisfying part of building a car. So he's ploughing through all that and with great success. So that's that. Saab is going to be a little bit brief this week because Bobby's hours on this have been very limited because Bobby hasn't been here. Bobby's been away for a chunk of time. So we had a little bit at the tail end of last week, and he's in today. Today he's actually upstairs doing some CAD. And what Bobby is drawing on CAD is the inner quarter panels. where the rear speakers are going to be mounted into the inside of the quarter panel, basically behind here. And that also offers some reinforcement to the inner structure of the car. It also ties the sill into that part of the car. And it also offers some reinforcement to the seatbelt mountings in that area. So it's a four-man function panel. Obviously it mounts the trim panels in that area as well. So yeah, Bobby's working on the CAD drawing for both of those inner quarter panels, which should be mirrors of each other anyway, hopefully. If they're not, we've got problems. So he's going to be doing those. That's what he's drawing at the moment, and he's done some finishing off in the rear bulkhead area and with the rear seating, which we talked about before. So there's just continuing previous work there. Really, there's no point in me elaborating greatly on that. It's all looking beautiful. There's some beautiful fabrication done there, and things are progressing very well in the cabin area. That's all coming together well. We've now got most of the parts that we needed to press on with the engine installation. However, as I mentioned last week, we're at a bit of a stumbling block with the starters, and I think we're still waiting for the other starter motor to turn up, which I suspect also won't fit, and then we'll be back to scratching our heads over Audi's design ideas in regard to S4 V8 starter motors. Here we go. Pop quiz for any people watching. For a 2007 Audi S4 B7 V8, what's the part number for the starter motor? We'll have a pop quiz and see if you all come up with the same part number. Because we can only find one part number and it doesn't fit. Manual transmission, this is 6-speed manual transmission. So we'll see what you can come up with, because we cannot find what starter motor fits this. It's bizarre, and I'm kicking myself for scrapping the original starter motor. We got rid of the engine. The engine was broken anyway in this car. That's why the car was a good donor, because we didn't want the engine, and the engine was broken. I didn't take the starter motor off the engine. I should have done. I wish I had now. Here we are. Moving on, we will move on to the E9. Whiz round this way. But we're going to whiz past the back, because the back is awaiting Nitron, who we have been talking to. Nitron Suspension are building the suspension for this car, and I had a very productive conversation with Andy at Nitron, who may be watching this video. If he is, hi Andy. But a very helpful conversation, and there's a bit of chicken and egg about the front suspension strut length, in that we know what ride height we want to run this car at. However, we haven't drawn this car. This one we've talked about the sort of yin and yang of the Retropower CAD versus making it up as we go, and the fact that that's actually quite an efficient way to build a car. And in this particular instance, because it's very, very similar in many respects to, if not one BMW, at least a combination of various BMWs, we don't have the whole car in CAD. We have no reason to. There is no point us having the car in CAD. Stu can make up most of the metal work that he needs to do on the fly anyway. We have the jig fixtures to align the suspension parts where we need them to be aligned. So there's no point doing it in CAD, because we already have the fixtures and the rest can be made up. That does leave us in a slight predicament, in that we don't actually know the strut length that we need to achieve the ride height that we want and have a suitable stroke both sides of ride height. And Nitron have made struts for the front of E30 M3s, which is effectively what the front end of this car will be previously, but they've always been really aimed at track use, so they're very short. They're actually 4 inches approximately shorter than a standard E30 M3 strut. And Andy at Nitron wisely had suggested that maybe that could be too low for this particular application. Now I don't know, and nor does he. So what he's doing is arranging that we have one strut made up as a dry build unit that's just tacked into the base forging that carries the wheel, so that it can be taken apart again. That's built with no oil, no gas. It's just a loose assembled damper that is built at approximately 2 inches, 50 mil shorter than a standard strut, but it can be shortened to be the full 4 inches shorter than a standard strut. Then we can try that at 2 inches. With it assembled to the car, we can put it through its travel to full bump travel, full droop travel. We know what ride height we're aiming for on the car, we know where the actual centre lines need to be, and from that we can then deduce whether that strut body length will work. That's where we're on the suspension. I'll stop waffling on that one. Coming on to the front, exciting stuff. We're putting bits on. They're old bits. Obviously the car won't be built with old bits, the car will be built with new bits. But We're trying it with the old bits from the, as you'll remember, the E46 M3 donor car that donated its heart to this beast. So along with that, we kept the whole car. We still have the whole car, but we also kept all of the peripheral parts, one of which is the cooler pack. And actually, at the very beginning of the project, we were very skeptical about this, but our customer said, why don't you see if the cooler pack will fit? And we said, well, we could, but modern cooler packs are usually really wide and quite short, because modern cars are wide and not very tall, and they don't normally fit. Well, strangely enough, it fits perfectly. It couldn't really fit any better in the front of the E9, so he was quite right. And we have trial fitted it. It fits really nicely. So Stu's now putting in the mounting pieces that we need to be able to fit everything, basically, give or take. I don't think we're using the fan shroud, but pretty much everything else we're planning to use exactly as it came from the E46 M3. So we're using the radiator, we're using the I've forgotten what the cooler is, power steering cooler, and we're using the air conditioning condenser, all from an E46 M3. We're going to retain the viscous cooling fan on the engine, which fits, and we're going to use the E46 M3 auxiliary electric fan, which I believe would primarily be for cooling the AC condenser when the car's not moving anywhere very fast, and at low RPM in traffic, that sort of thing, basically to retain the efficiency of the AC in traffic. So all of that fits really well. Stu's cracking on with that. I know he was working on the brackets this morning, which aren't just lying next to me. Here you go, brackets. I'll pick one up, which is going to mess around his welding. Basically, he's made these brackets, which he's going to TIG weld up, which are going to hold the electric fan and mount it off this area here and here. It's going to hold the electric fan off these off the back of the original radiator support structure. So the radiator's now mounted a bit further back and hung directly onto the chassis rails. It's a really nice setup. It's almost, as I said earlier, almost like it was meant to fit in this car, apart from the massive hole in the bulkhead, which we've had to cut to clear the back. So we've got quite a bit of work to do there. But the rest of it fits almost like it was meant for the job. We'll just ignore the huge hole in the bulkhead and transmission tunnel. So yeah, that's progressing really well. Cooler pack's going in. And the other bit on this is coolant hoses, which I was just talking to Stu about. I think we're probably going to make some custom hoses up, because the E46 hoses don't really fit, because we've got the engine mounted lower versus the radiator. Before anybody says, no, not low enough to cause us any issues, we can still bleed the system. The system heights will still work perfectly well. In terms of the coolant heights within the engine and the radiator, no problems there. Obviously we need the header tank to be at a suitable height. No problems there, but the problem is that the hoses need a stagger in, and they basically don't fit. The hose lengths won't be right, or the right shape. So I think what we're probably going to do is custom make some hoses for this. We'll either do aluminium with rubber joiners at the ends, or we'll make some mandrels and have some hoses made, probably by Good Flex Rubber or somebody like that, if we decide to actually make full flexible hoses. So that's what's going on there. And then lastly, inlet manifold. A bit of discussion, as you can see, it has the standard inlet plenum. Obviously these M3 engines, I think most people would be familiar who watch our channel, because most of you are car nuts through and through, I believe, but you'd be familiar with the fact that the E46 M3 runs throttle bodies as standard, and there they are. It runs a very nice setup, in fact. There's a little case in point of one reason why it's good to keep a lot of OEM parts. This little thing here, obviously that's a fuel rail. To those not familiar, there's the injectors, there's the fuel rail. That is an idle air control valve rail, which is a really nice setup, because with throttle bodies, as you'll have seen on the Allegro projects as an example, we have to put quite a bit of work into getting idle air into throttle bodies so we can run idle control with a set of throttle bodies. A lot of people will just bolt throttle bodies on, and if I was doing it in my garage at home, I would still do the same. Bolt them on, don't run a separate idle air control, you just hold the revs up with your foot on the accelerator for the first few seconds of warm up, and then the idle is fine after that. Maybe it's slightly high when it's really hot, maybe it's a little bit low when it's really cold, but other than that, it idles fine. However, the really professional way to do it, and the way to compensate for engine RPM changes under loads, under variable loads, like an AC compressor kicking in and out, is to run a separate control of air into the engine to control the engine's power output at idle, to balance the loads that are on it at idle, rather than assuming that it can cope with all those load changes without any change in actual input. So that's what this is here. This allows a metered amount of air to be admitted into the throttles so that the engine power output can be raised to keep up with its ancillary loads, parasitic loads. And that's not a setup you'll find on very many production engines. It's a really neat way of doing it, so we're retaining it. Anyway, moving on from that, inlet plenum, we're not using this one. Cal and Stu were having a look at it yesterday with a view to any ideas they could come up with of a neat way of doing various things. And Cal remembered, probably partially because there's one sitting down at the Den, which he would have looked at a few times, that the CSL, E46 CSL inlet manifold, has the filter built into it as a big panel type filter rather than a separate filter before the plenum. The filter is built in, which is very helpful because it's compact. It also has a much nicer shape. It would be much more, much better from a power point of view, and it's a much nicer flowing arrangement. Possibly slightly, I imagine this, I think, reading between the lines, BMW have shaped this manifold to aid torque, to aid low down torque. Now, we don't really need to aid low down torque too much in this car, and I suspect that the CSL manifold was the bias the other way and biased slightly in favour of higher power with a bit of a loss of low down torque. I might be wrong there. I'll be quite happy for comments to correct me on that one. But normally, when there's a large volume to the plenum and a big drop from the inlets down into the bottom of the plenum, it's usually to gain a point of reflection in the plenum to increase the effective intake length at certain RPM to aid low down torque. I may be wrong though. But anyway, the CSL one fits really well. We can get a nice carbon fibre one, and it fits in the engine bay nicely, and the filter's built into it rather than having to have a separate filter, which just aids our installation and makes it really neat. So that's what's going on in here. I think there's been a discussion with the customer about sourcing one of those, an aftermarket CSL carbon fibre intake, which I think we're doing now. So that'll all be going in. That'll look really neat. Stu, there may be a tiny bit of metalwork to do over on one side of the inner wing, but nothing major. And if there is, then Stu will deal with it. So that's where all of that's at. I'm going to shut up now and move on, because you've had enough of me talking about that. And we will move on. Put my mug on there if you want a mug. You know where to buy them. We'll move on to the Aston Martin, which is actually starting to look quite a lot like a car. I was sitting in this with Matt earlier because we were just working out a few details on the bulkhead, which is one of the primary areas that have been worked on, which I'll elaborate on in a minute. But we were sitting in it earlier and it's got to that stage now. Obviously, it's sat up on a jig, so it feels a bit strange, but it's got to the point now where you feel like you're sitting in a car, and that's quite an exciting point. It really, that's what kind of makes me tick, that sort of thing. It's that bit where what was a big pile of bits of box section and sheet metal and ideas suddenly starts to turn into something that's actually a car, and it's very, very exciting. So we're at that stage now where I can kind of see the end product. So the rundown on this is that, I think we briefly mentioned it last week, ASR are proceeding with the bonnet. Sean is cracking on with that. We had a bit of a conversation back and forth. He's got a plan. We're happy with the plan. We're happy with the pound notes associated with the plan. So he's cracking on getting us a bonnet, which will be great. Luke has been doing some design work on the bulkhead, which I will leave him to elaborate on. But needless to say, he has designed it. There's been some toing and froing on bits of it. As usual, we're tight for space in certain areas, and Luke's trying to balance a number of things out at the design stage, and also making the right assumptions. Luke's obviously still learning quite a lot as well. You know, he's not been doing this for very long, so he's on a very steep learning curve, and he's learning about what bits, how I would do things, so I might correct him on some things just because that's not how I would want it done, but also just the juggling of things in space and what clearances can be maintained to what, and what's as good clearance and what's too tight or what's too wide, everything else. So he's on a steep learning curve, but he's done a lovely job. So we now have the two footwells dummy assembled. They're all screwed together at the minute. Matt quite rightly likes to screw everything together temporarily, get everything assembled, so we've got quite a lot of things assembled with screws, and then he'll stitch weld it all once we're certain that everything fits, which is very, very wise and a very good way to do it. So both the footwells are now all screwed together, everything fits, that's great. So Matt's now moved on to the tunnel. He's got the forward section, which I always think of as a fireplace, basically the bit that does a relatively square shape transitioning into a relatively round shape, which looks a bit like a cast iron Victorian fireplace. So he's got that piece made, and he's now doing what I would generically call a square to round transition, which basically takes the relatively square, albeit with radius corners, front end of the tunnel and transitions it to the almost completely round topped tunnel section at the front. I can see that because he's literally got the cardboard in place at the minute. He's just working on that at the moment. So he's going to be shaping all that lot. And then the other side to things is the roll cage, which I think we mentioned last week. There's been some toing and froing and discussion with the customer and scratching of heads and changing of ideas, and we're making a few tweaks to the cage. So I've pulled all those bits back out. Some of it's going to have to be remade. Some of it, I'm hoping I can reuse. The main hoop, we've decided to put a curve in the top of the main hoop. I wouldn't normally put a curve in that. We've decided on balance, perhaps it should have a curve in it. So I've tried to add that to the existing hoop. We'll see how that goes. If that doesn't work, I'll have to redo it. And the front legs, we're going to change the way we've done the front legs slightly, and put a bit more of a roll into them and fit them slightly higher in the car. There's a balancing act in that the higher you fit them, align my hand to the camera, the inside of this roof frame here is angled like that. You put the tube in there, the higher you put it, the more inboard it moves it, and your head's here, moves it nearer to your head, but it does move it higher relative to your head. I think actually where that moves maintains pretty much an equal distance to your head when you're actually sat in there, but I'd actually put that slightly lower down, figuring that the being more outboard would actually give you a bit more head clearance. What it did though was mean that you could see the very bottom of the tube just below the door seal at the top, and it can't exactly follow that line at the bottom because it then doesn't intersect the main hoop in the right place. So I had to deviate from that curve a little bit, and we've concluded that actually if we mounted the whole thing higher up, it could follow the curve more continuously and intersect the main hoop more nicely, albeit at the expense of being very slightly further inboard. All of this is extremely fiddly and very time consuming, because there isn't really a quick way of making a tube that's rolled, bent, rolled in two different planes and bent again at the bottom and fish mouthed at that end, all to an accuracy of probably a couple of millimeters at any point along that tube. It's pretty tricky to do with a manual tube bender, and to be honest, I don't think you could really do it with a CNC, because you'd have to put it in as a progression of bends anyway, and the accuracy at each bend would then deviate a little, and I don't think you get the accuracy even done that way. So yeah, tricky. So we'll get there, but it's challenging. It's not going to be a 5-minute job doing the cage in this car, and it does need to be very tight. We're looking at how we're going to be trimming that. More on that in the future. Won't elaborate now. But needless to say, there's quite a lot of thought going in, I think I mentioned this last week, into how the cage is going to be trimmed, and we have a plan, but it does depend heavily on the cage pretty much being absolutely consistent in its following of the shape of the inside of the A-pillar and the cantrail. So yeah, watch this space on that one. So Luke will be continuing, I'll let him elaborate, Luke will be continuing on that. But as I said last week, we're not a million miles away from this being able to go on its wheels. To that end, I need to make some wheels. We've got some mock-up wheels, which are just some cheap steels of the right diameter and width. I'm going to chop the centres out of them, whip up some new centres, which we'll tack in on the correct offset, stick some tyres on them, and then we can put them on the car and do the final checks in terms of wheel clearance to outer bodywork and all of the other stuff where we compare scans and CAD to real world and find out how well the two align. So I think that's everything on that. Moving on from that, body shop is being bitty bobby. There's nothing really exciting to show on that front. There's been a lot of parts refurbishment going on, engine parts being prepared for the Portofino engine, I believe, in the background. Mark and Gaz have been doing some work on those. Getting aluminium parts prepared, and there's been some parts prep for jobs down at the Den, but nothing enormously photogenic and nothing that exciting for me to show you that you're going to revel in watching. So at that point, and without further ado or further me blathering on, I'm going to hand over to Cal, who's back from his holidays, and let him show you around the assembly shop. So see you next week. Okay.
Thank you very much, Nat. And you find me between two of British Leyland's finest automobiles, and back after my holiday, which was very nice. It was a cruise up the coast of Norway, taking in the fjords. But for the first time, we went right round the northern cape to Honningsvåg, which is, I believe, the most northern town in mainland Europe. So yes, back relatively refreshed, although holidaying with young children does mean that the holiday is never quite as refreshing as you expect. Nonetheless, let's move on. In the workshop this week, because it's a bank holiday Monday and we've been putting a lot of focus onto two cars that are in my peripheral vision over here, which I can't really talk about, I haven't got an enormous amount to cover, and I've decided what I'm going to do is save up the bits that I have got to talk about this week and go into them a bit more next week. However, on the subject of next week, quite excitedly, I can announce that we are going to be showing off Project Stravaig, the 68 Camaro that we've been working on probably since 68, to be fair. And we're going to be showing that off at the Drivers Collection show at the Sheffield Aero Park, I think it's called. We'll put the link down below. I'll be there, several members of staff from here will be there, so please come along and have a look at the car. Fingers crossed for the weather. It's a show that's kind of been on my radar for a while. I've heard about it, you know, their little meets they do, and it's starting to get quite a buzz amongst a lot of the cooler people I know with cool cars in the car scene. And often you find shows and events go through this kind of peak where they're becoming popular but still under the radar enough to be ridiculously cool, and then sometimes they can get, perhaps in the instance of something like Ultra, it's a bit too big and a bit too popular. So I think we're catching this one at just the right time. So yeah, 7th of September. That's next Sunday. If you're watching this episode pretty much as it comes out, come along and say hello and see Project Stravaig. And I will add in a thank you here, because there was some Xylan coating we needed to do on some components that we've only just finished on Stravaig. And our coating company we go to for that work, East Midlands Coatings, have very, very kindly pulled out all the stops to get a batch of Xylan coating through very quickly, unusually quickly. So thank you, Alan at East Midlands Coatings. And to those of you who are in the business of building cars or doing it DIY, if you want any surface finishing processes done, East Midlands Coatings at Hinckley are the people to go to. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Luke in the CAD den to see what he's been up to this week.
Hi guys, welcome back to this week's CAD Conundrum, which is primarily focused around Churchill and the DBS as per last week. On the DBS, it's kind of wrapping up the CAD work that I was doing in real life, so working hand in hand with Matt to transfer CAD to reality. I'll chuck Jamie across some renders and then maybe you can splice that in with some actual footage of the car being built up at the minute. There were only a few tweaks that had to be made, which is really good. Tried the HVAC in the car, that sits mint. Tried the pedal box in the car, which now fits mint as well. Actually got to sit in the car as well with the driver's side footwell in there, and that's looking rather comfy as well. So really happy with how that's coming along. Just this morning I've been working on the duct that feeds from the HVAC fan up into the actual HVAC unit. As I've said 1,000,001 times in these videos, and as I'll probably say forever, is that fitting a HVAC in a classic car is really difficult, and often what we find is we have to split the fan from the unit, which we have done here. So that duct kind of needs to come from the footwell back up into the HVAC unit and not hit the wheel, because that would be bad. So I've kind of created a quite funky shaped duct which takes the same surface area as the exit of the fan and the entrance to the HVAC unit, but in a weird, not mashed up shape, but a weird fitted shape to not collide with the wheel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bit of reinforcement on the back of that, so no stones or anything like that cause any issues. So I think once we've got a mock-up wheel in hand and we can put that on the car, I'll PLA print that and we can test by just literally lifting the wheel up and jiggling it around and making sure that that's not going to collide with anything. So I think that's it for now on the DBS. And then on Churchill, I think towards the end of last week's video I had printed off one of the trim panels. I've now printed off the rest of them and tried them in the car. The side that it was all modelled off was pretty bang tidy, to be honest. including the door card. I got the remaining trim clips that were broken off of it from the Den, tried the actual door card on the car. That's going to look like it's going to work really well. I've prototyped a little bezel which is going to sit around the kind of door latch area, and then bolts into the bolts that actually hold the door lock onto the door itself. Not only is that like a really nice finishing piece because it'll be in copper, it's also going to be a method of actually pulling that door card around that latch into the door itself, because these doors actually aren't flat whatsoever. They've got quite a big curvature for them, and when you're using a material like Dibond from your card, it wants to always pull straight, so that's just going to help keep that in place and look really nice as well. I have handed that over to James now, so he can do a bunch of measuring up and sanding and prepping to actually get that trimmed. I cannot wait to see that trimmed because the rears were done a while ago now, and the design is basically cool in the fact that the front door flows into the rear door in quite a cool way, and so once that's trimmed in the car, we'll be able to get a really nice shot for you guys where you kind of see the design work come together a little bit, which I'm really excited for. The other thing I did on that front door card yesterday was kind of finalise the design for the pull close handle. I'll grab that from over here as well, which is this here, which you're going to say looks like a leather strap, and that's intentional. It sits into a backing and it will bolt in like this, but will actually be machined out of a material that can be copper plated along with the rest of the trim. And so it's a copper leather door strap, and it actually conforms to like gravity and everything, so yeah, I think that's going to be pretty cool. I might be tooting my own horn a little bit, but oh well, toot toot. And along with that, once all that trim was kind of in place, once the I had the kind of side roof trim in place, once I had James's fantastic work on modelling the rear seats in place, I did a little scan of the rear roof area again, and then the other side of the rear roof, so now I can go ahead with tweaking my designs for the bits that all need to fit together to fit in with that scan where I know all those trim places are going to sit, and so the final product will look lovely and OEM, hopefully. So yeah, short one. Nearly forgot. I've also finished manufacturing all the parts for the 500 SEC down at the Den. I went over on Tuesday, which was our first day back. I hope everyone had a lovely bank holiday Monday. And dropped that off to Luke. He's really happy with it and should be mocking that up on the car now, I think, or like final building it on the car now. So yeah, all steam ahead on that front as well. I think I'm going to leave it there, nice and short and sweet. Thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Luke, and I'm going to hand straight back now to the Den. We will see you next Sunday, if not in person at the Drivers Collection show, then certainly on another video. So we'll catch you then.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Den. We haven't got that much exciting going on this week. It's been more the fact I've spent so much time trying to source parts for the BMW, but we've had some improvements on a Mercedes. Luke has come back to us with the 3D printed intakes, so it's not quite as asthmatic anymore. It can breathe a little bit, but we haven't gone down the whole route of like giving it an inhaler or supercharger or turbo, but I think that's a bit too expensive. But anyway, I think it looks good. Hope you guys do, and I think the customer's going to love it. Initially, I don't know if you can remember, it was just a single intake into this side of the pan originally, and then we found out, I think it was the 550 or the 450 has a twin intake, so we managed to find the lower section of the air pan, which has got the two intakes, and what we've done from that is we've increased the diameter of this pipe to allow more airflow, and we've also increased the one on this side a little bit to add more airflow. So hopefully it should feel just that little bit more responsive. The next thing will be the exhaust, which is in the stages of being estimated. That's that. We've got some of the interior back in. Brilliant. Brilliant. We've got a decent steering wheel as well now. It used to have a Nardi one. Now I like the Nardi one, customer didn't, but I must admit this does look a lot better than the Nardi one. It just ties in with the seats lovely. And yeah, the seats look lovely. I'm really impressed with how this has come out, and I think James and Ellie, it's a true credit to their workmanship. Fantastic job, absolutely fantastic job. So anyway, that's off the ramp now, and I think what I'm going to do over the next couple of days, probably get it on a 4-poster ramp to get the 4-wheel alignment done since we've lowered it. So that is that. The Porsche, did I say it right? I hope I said it right. I'll get there one day. I just like calling it Porsche, it's just easier. That's been detailed, been MOT'd, and looks gorgeous. A reflection on that. Just look at it. Yeah, it's just really looks amazing, really does. Chris has done a proper job on that, I think. Over here, what have we got going over? Owen at the moment is back off his holiday, and he is in the process of building up the rear subframe to the MGF over there, ready to put the engine back in it. Another reason why I've got the steering wheel and the interior on the Mercedes, because I want to get that off the ramp, get that put back on the ramp, so all of this can start going back together. That's going to see some big good progress on this, I think. The Cappuccino, we are just taking off the wings and arch spats. There's a little bit of scratch work on good England. A little bit of damage on the wings on the front here. I think it happened in transportation. The arch spats are second hand, so they need to go body coloured. So we're taking those off to get them painted up at Retropower. Stratos. That has the aircon compressor removed from it. That's going away for testing, and we replaced the TXV valve on it as well. So hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, we should have working aircon on this beast. So that's that. 633. This has had quite a little bit of work done this week, but there's nothing to see, unfortunately. We have replaced a couple of pipes in the engine bay. Yet again, it doesn't really stand out, so there's not a lot to show you. We had rough running and the revs were picking up on their own quite easily. So we've done a smoke test on it. We found the fuel metering valve that was melted on the bottom half. The bottom half was plastic casing. And as I took it off, the plastic casing just literally dropped away. What I'll do is I'll go through my phone. I'm sure I've got an image, and I'll give it to Jamie, see if he can upload it. So we've got, believe it or not, a new one of those coming, genuine, which is surprising. So that is that. Oh, something really strange. I think that you'll find quite exciting. Not exciting. I don't know why I keep saying exciting, because it's not exciting, but to some people it might be interesting. So we got some plastic chrome trims that go on the door handles. Now you're thinking, oh, 1978 car, these are going to be a nightmare to get hold of. Guess what? BMW still sell them. Yes, I've managed to get these from BMW, but I couldn't get a rotor arm for the Dizzy Cap or HT leads from BMW because they don't make those, but they make these. Where's the logic in that? I don't get it. But never mind. I've managed to source those parts anyway. So yes, so next week I'm hoping we'll have a big delivery of parts. So might see a little bit of work if I can get Jamie down here to see some work going on that. Over this way, the Lexus is at a stop because a lot of the parts have gone for zinc plating. There's still a couple of bits here that have got to go for powder coating, but they go somewhere else. So I'm hoping they may get sent off beginning of next week. I think it'd be nice. So yes, that's that. And as the MG, here we are. Still on its trolley, but like I said, hopefully by the end of today, that's going to be back on a 2-poster. Owen's been rebuilding the hubs, and so they will be ready to go back on. I'm kind of clutching at straws to try and make this sound interesting this week, but I am struggling, I won't lie. We have got a new lad, and he seems to have disappeared. But hopefully next week I'll introduce you to the new lad. I think I might start nicknaming him Mullet Matt. Here he is. This is our new technician, the handsome man boy. This is Mullet Matt. Like to say hello?
Hello, I'm Mullet Matt.
So yeah, Matt's been start work Tuesday, and he's been powering through. He's done a lot of work on a 633, and he's also taken the wings off the Cappuccino at the moment. Great addition to the company. Looking forward to work with him. And that is pretty much it from down here. I'm going to hand up to the man who shows so much emotion, and when he finds things funny, he actually, expresses it. So I will hand you up to the one and only James.
Hi, welcome back to the trim shop. This week, it's been a short week for me because Thursday, Friday, and obviously Bank Holiday Monday, I was at Carfest, which is a epic festival, families and everything, and I was hooning the imp around the track. So Jamie's going to put a short video up of me giving it some stick. So never really usually get to give it some stick, so it's quite fun to take it around. So, and been trying to persuade Cal to maybe take some Retropower cars next year, maybe, because it's moving to Silverstone, so that'd be pretty awesome.
And welcome in, and we'll make you feel very much at home. You're in cars, you're in the car club.
Work-wise, yesterday we spent most of the day laying everything into Churchill to see what we've got. Rears all went in, spoke to Cal about that, see how we're going. We're happy with the direction we're going in. The doors have arrived for Churchill, so going to be sanding them down, patterning them, and hopefully getting them covered so they can go back in. Rear seats, I have, so because there's not much foam, we've cut a hole in it and got some webbing, so we're going to, bit of an old-fashioned technique, but we're going to web it, and hopefully that just gives it a little bit, sink into it a little bit more, so it's not so hard on your bum, and that will look great. Ellie's going to start patterning these. She's done the diamonds, which she'll speak about, and yeah, Churchill's moving. Had to work out as well with the leather because it was ordered quite a while ago, so the seats and rear door cards have been done. Just want to make sure that, because it'll be a different batch of leather, want to make sure it would be the right shade just in case it's slightly off. So I've been trying to work out, just making sure we can get the rear seats and the doors out of it, just so everything there is the same shade. So that's just a bit of it'll be fine, but it's just a bit of a cautionary thing just in case it does come a different shade. And then the 500 SEC, I've literally just finished the front seat. So Luke's just buying that in, the rears are in place, so Jamie will get a couple of good shots of that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, I wasn't going to hand over to Ellie this week, but she scratched my car yesterday because I took her to Retropower. So to get revenge, here's Ellie.
Hi everyone, thanks Jay, sorry about your car. This week I finished the quilting, it's looking really nice. The non-woven on the backs really give that definition to the diamonds, and it's looking really good, which has led me on to this one, which you'll notice isn't on such a thicker padding because it's getting wrapped around a panel and we don't want that bulk in it, and the diamonds are also slightly smaller, so it's not cutting them off and you get a full couple of diamonds. I'm also going to be patterning the seats for those diamonds to go onto. So as you can see, I've already started just loosely making each panel as I go along, and then I'll be building it up. We've also got the steering wheel in the car downstairs, and that's looking really nice. We also have a new Instagram account. It's Retropower_trim shop, so give us a follow. And I think I'm going to pass you back to Luke. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ellie, for that update. Brilliant. She has our local unicorn. Yeah, I'm not too sure if she qualifies as being classed as the unicorn, but I suppose that's an inside joke. you'll have to have known of a certain YouTube video to know what we're going on about. Might have to have a word with Jay, see if we can incorporate somewhere or another. Not too sure if we can. But anyway, so Jamie has also showed you, I forgot to drop this in, showed you a video of, or photos of an air filter, the Den branded air filters. If you fancy a Den branded air filter, replacement panel filter in your car, give us a shout. I'm sure we can hook you up. And Nick will take that on, I'm sure he will. I think he may currently be inflating his dinghy to bring back certain 205 contraband back from France. Not too sure, maybe. We'll see. I'd like to say thank you very much for your interaction on last week's videos. It was quite surprising how many of you actually took part of it and commented. I really appreciate it. I found it quite interesting on the difference of cars of you people have had and agreed on how rubbish they are. So yeah, thanks very much for that. And then I appreciate all your really nice comments towards me for being a natural. Yeah, thanks very much. I wouldn't say quite that, but yeah, I don't think I could do what Cal and Nat do, because I ain't got a clue what they do up there. You know, it's the stuff they do, it's like a work of art. So for me to do a walk around video up there, it'd be leagues different. There'll be a lot of and I wouldn't have a bloody clue. But anyway, thanks for your nice comments, and hopefully see you next week.